Live on WFLA Now. Feel good and live your best life with Bloom Health Club. Here's Gail Guayardo.
Today we're talking about bouncing forward in lieu of back-to-back hurricanes this season that ravaged the first one 500 miles of the eastern coastline, only to have another one right behind it, taking people's belongings, taking their loved ones away, destroying everything they know in life. So today we're going to talk to a performance and mindset coach. She's a two-time TEDx speaker, presenting powerfully, Debbie Lundberg, who herself is living her own motto. Debbie, welcome to Bloom. It's so great to see you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I wish we're different circumstances, of course, because it's always enjoyable to be with you. Sharing the bouncing forward, though, is so important. So thank you for addressing it.
Yeah, it really is. Debbie herself lost everything. Her home is gone. There's no, renovations. The majority of her belongings are gone. And she's been sharing her story on social media, and the outpouring of love that's come in the wake of it has been really incredible. And it's been an eye-opener of how community comes together during such dark times.
They really do. They want to be the light. And sometimes if we don't allow people to do something, they feel even farther away. So by allowing people to be part of the moving forward, you're including them on the journey and you're giving them hope, and they have actionable items to feel as though they contributed, because they really did contribute.
And you've actually kind of started a movement out of this. Talk to me about that.
It was interesting. So it was Thursday during the night. We saw the house consumed by the storm surge. And as we were grateful to be at our neighbors after Michael held Daisy over his head and I swam across, because within 45 minutes it had really come on strong. So while we were there, we just made a post that we'd lost the house and that we would be taking care of things the next day, and just to show up. Don't text, don't call, please, because we may not be able to respond. But people showed up, 30 on Friday, 40 on Saturday, 50 on Sunday. And as we were waiting for the adjuster to show up on Sunday, sitting out in God knows what chairs, and I said to Michael, you know what we just experienced? I said, it's active love. And it really struck me that people want to do something, and the people who were able to show up, and I realize not everybody can, but they acted on that love. And so, yes, I coined the phrase active love, and people have really kindly taken to it.
I love it because, I to your point, people do want to do something, but they just never know what to do. And you and I talk about the loss of hurricanes, and what we're seeing, the destruction is going to be living on. It's going to take people years to rebuild. So now more than ever, active love is something that we need to embrace. It's not just, yes, it was great for everybody that showed up, all the help to clear out the house, but this is something that you and I have been talking about that we need to launch through the holiday season and beyond. So when you talk about active love, what does that mean?
Active love means not saying, let me know what I can do, or even saying, how are you? Because those require a response. And for some people, even responding to a question or a text or a phone call, it's nearly debilitating because there's been 27 to 270 other things. Active love is, here, I did it. So somebody shows up with food, or somebody sends you a gift card, or somebody shows up and says, I'm gonna take your kids for an hour while you go do this. It's not as though you're going to rest. It's that you're going to be able to do something even more productively. So the active love is somebody taking action from the kindness of their heart without needing necessarily your permission or your guidance. And it may not, it's not going to be perfect. But what it is it's perfectly wonderful that people want to engage without saying, here's a to-do for you. If I send to you and say, well, Gail, I'm sorry to hear this happened, any type of loss, let me know what I can do. Now you've got to think about what's my capacity, what are my capabilities, and then you're supposed to assign me something. That's really not the way to go. It's better for me to say, these are the two things that I'm good at. And I'm going to do both of them unless you tell me not to. If you don't want me to, tell me, but otherwise, please don't respond. The best thing you can say to somebody is no response required.
I love that.
Yeah.
You're right, because response is one more act on a to-do list that people have that's a mile long. I want to talk about, because mindset is your specialty. It's what you teach people to move forward with their careers, with their lives, with their dreams. But mindset really comes into play right now because this is the type of loss that people feel all the time. It doesn't need to be a hurricane that rips away everything. It could be a bitter divorce and you lost the house that you were used to living in. You lost precious time spent with your kids. You lost finances. I mean, loss happens all the time through death, whatever the case may be. What is the mindset focus when you feel like you've hit rock bottom?
Yes, mindset is knowing that loss is part of living. And so that's not a negative. It's that loss is part of having had. So you can't lose unless you've had. And it's not to be a Pollyanna about it. But if your mindset is, what did I gain from what I had before this was removed? So even status is challenging for people. There's a status about where you live, or if you were married, or if you had that home. So when you think about what did I gain is more of the mindset than what am I losing? Because if we say that we've lost, we can feel like a loser. Mm-hmm. And nobody is designed to feel that way. But we can do that, unfortunately, with our language or who we surround ourselves with. So when you think about mindset and you have had an unfortunate experience, and you're right, every single one of us will, unfortunately, in the future, have more the more we live. So if you say, okay, this is what I had and this is what I'm going to do now, let's not attempt to get back to something or recapture or reposition, because it'll never be the same. So whether it's the loss of a life in a family or friend or home, it's to say, now that I'm in this place, how am I moving forward, as opposed to how am I focused on the loss? Because focus on the loss and you'll feel lost. Focus on the future and you'll feel like you can gain from your experience. Not that you won't have grief. Grief is part of a positive mindset to process through.
I believe that. And I think too, like, walking through the darkness of life is never easy. I've been there. 20 years ago, I lost everything. And this is not a podcast about Gail, but I'll tell you, everything I knew in my life was over. And, there were many days that seemed long and dark, but after I look back at it in retrospect, what I learned, the character building, the personal changes in myself, the relationships built, life built. It's really transformative if you can just see that light at the end of the tunnel, which is very difficult when you're up to your ears in everything being turned upside down in life, which a lot of people are.
It's true. And if you don't see the light, I didn't mean it to rhyme, but as I'm hearing it in my head, it does. It's be the light. So if you can't see the bright light, be a little bit of a light and realize what is something today. And this language is okay. It's not great. Sometimes if I feel that way, I say, what wasn't as bad as it was yesterday? Now, that comparison, you don't want to stay in that forever. But if it's a tremendously dark day and tomorrow is dark, but it's not as dark, and you say, you know what wasn't as dark? It wasn't as dark getting in my car by myself today because I felt less insecure about where I was and where I was going. I felt a little bit more security. If you can take every bit of that and make that your gratitude and make that your okay, you will move from okay to better than okay to acting really on your own 2 feet, and you keep moving forward. So the light is there, but if it's so dark that you don't see it, you don't want to succumb to it. You want to be it in some small way.
I want to talk about the role reversal for you on a personal level. You are by nature a giver. I mean, that's what you do. I think it's your love language to give. It's what fills your heart, and obviously all the friends and supporters that you have, it fills theirs as well. But what was it like being on the receiving end of giving? Because I also need to mention to our Bloom Health Club listeners and viewers today that, we've talked to Debbie on Bloom, our globally syndicated health and wellness show, about actually being a living organ donor. I mean, and alongside her husband. So giving complete strangers life is something that you were willing to do, which is very self-sacrificing, to say the least. So talk to me about what it was like being on the receiving end.
It was unusual. And believe me, we're surrounded with very giving people. So I don't mean it that people aren't consistently providing us with great support and uplift, but the idea that we don't even have a suitcase. We don't even have, there's no food. I mean, there's nothing. All my shoes, my running shoes, were on the ground because that's where I keep them, in the closet. And there was one pair. And I mean, I went to see one of my running buddies, and she asked me about it, and I said, please get me a pair of running shoes. And to get that out, I almost felt like, is that greedy? But it wasn't. And she's like, absolutely, I'm on it. And I thought, I'm going to ask now. I'm going to make those asks. And then when people asked us what we wanted, Michael and I had a conversation, and we said, we're going to say yes, thank you to everyone, no matter what. And people who we don't really know, people who we do know well. And it became part of our sense of belonging. And then when people started sharing that people lost everything, I mean, we have clothes, and we had 10 families. They'd say, what can I do? I'm like, take a bag of clothes. Apparently with salt water, if you wash it 3 times in hot water within 24 hours, there's a good chance of saving it. So now that we have clothes and we're hearing people don't have any clothes, we sent out that if you can come pick them up, you can take the clothes. So I think it perpetuated what we wanted to do. But in those first few days, we decided this is where we are, and let's let people assist us, even though it's uncomfortable. And then it just became a flow of truly active love. I mean, we felt the love.
I love that. I want to bring in Brody Waddell, who is Bloom's digital reporter and lead producer. I know you've been covering a lot of stories and seeing them up in the newsroom. Do you have any questions for Debbie?
I mean, is it more helpful to feel like you're in a position to give again, or is it more to receive, like you were talking about?
I think that when, as we were talking, Brody, that anytime you have that mindset of, I have more than I need, then you can give. So if you go from the darkness to the light, and the light is, I have 4 pairs of these shoes or 3 dresses, and this person has none, let me give them 2 because I'm okay with 1. Gail's right. For me, it was, I appreciate and I'm grateful for all that everybody gave. When, though, I felt like I could give a little something, it felt like I was more part of the community and not solely taking. So that part, I was telling Gail, there were apparently 100 apartments that people had to get, and I could have the number wrong. You guys probably know better, but where people had to be taken out by boat, and so many had children, and they're having their homecoming, and so they were asking for dresses. And I looked, and my dresses were all up high, and some of these wonderful friends, they put it, and the boxes said, Debbie, fun and formal. I was like, I don't know what all's in there. But if you can come and pick them up, you can take them. And right or wrong, good or bad, it made me feel better that those dresses may get worn at a homecoming, because I would hate to think of a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old not going to their homecoming because I had something called fun and formal in a box that they could have used. Because I'll go to a gala or formal, and I could get away with wearing this dress I'm wearing right now. I mean, so it's probably a long answer to a really appreciated thinking I had something to give.
What about all the people that have moved in with one another? I mean, you're cohabitating with other people, and did you go through that as well?
We did. We were very fortunate that Michael's dear best friend, who he happens to work for, the company really stepped in, and we stayed at his home. So we stayed at our neighbors across the street the first night. We stayed with Ben and Aaron and their kids 2 more nights. And then I said, I'm concerned I'm going to snap at someone because no matter what, I mean, I'm an optimist, but that was a lot. And so by that night, I said, I really just want to go up to the room, not because I want to be rude, but I'm concerned that I'm just going to say something or snap, So we wanted to go to a hotel, but there wasn't a hotel available. And the other point was, do we really want to search for one when some people don't have someone to stay with? So they kept saying, it's okay, come down. But I was like, I'm just going to stay in the room, not because I want to be antisocial, but because it really was I wasn't in the best headspace.
Right.
But then we were able to stay in a hotel for a couple of days, and people started reaching out because I do so much on family dynamics. They were saying, I'm staying with my brother, my sister, my mom, but they're driving me crazy with X. I'm like, okay, let's walk through it. Yeah. You have a house, you have a home, an apartment, something over your head. So people were asking me, how do I say this? And I liked that people said, do you have the capacity to answer this right now? And again, Brody, to your question, I thought, yes, I want to give you some language for it. But people being on top of people or in a space that they're not used to is unnatural in America. I mean, in other countries, it's very common to have many generations under one roof. I remember in Cuba seeing so many families together, but we're not used to it. And so it's that go outside, take a break, or say to somebody, because I love you and I'm grateful that I'm here, I'm going to go in the room by myself for right now because I'm probably not going to say anything that's useful. And it's okay to do that.
Right.
But and if you do snap at somebody or criticize them, give it a sincere apology and say, can we clear the air? Because it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I mean, we have a neighbor whose house was, decimated. She's living with us, and it's probably going to be for several months. And I would call this girl definitely a friend, but not the kind of friend that you see all the time, or you're dining with, or you're lunching with, or you're grabbing a quick. This is more like a tertiary friend. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, I think she is really, like zeroed in on the fact of boundaries of like, what can I do? May I walk with my dog who's the size of a horse in the backyard and just sit down and in the morning and answer some phone calls and some emails and things like that. So I think maybe boundary setting is a good one too. If you're living with somebody and you're doing it as an act of kindness, maybe setting up those boundaries at the start so it doesn't become problematic as the weeks and possibly months go by. Definitely. So this takes me back to when I used to move and I would have that 30 days. And one time I was in the same state as my parents and I stayed with them instead of in a hotel. And the very first night we went to dinner and talked about boundaries and how long was acceptable and what food, what amount of money, what times. And so you're right, Gail, having the boundaries and prefacing it by saying, because it's most important that we maintain our friendship, let's please have boundaries. And one of the best things you can do is each write down what you would like for your boundaries, because one of you is more vocal than the other, and one of you is more courteous than the other. And it's like that last piece of something where you're like, you have it. No, you have it. This is where you're living and this is your safe space. So if you all write down your husband, her, anybody who's going to be in the space, what times they're going to get up. And if you write them down first, you won't back down. And then you have conversations and you take a whiteboard if you have it, or just a big piece of paper and say, all right, in the morning, who's doing what? And then get agreement. And so the accountability becomes, what did you agree to? And even though it's a different experience and it's not what any of you want, you're going to make the best of the experience you have. But without doing that first, you're going to be saying to Brody one day, "Oh my gosh, I'm losing it. I'm just going to stay at the station." Yeah, yeah. You can see that, and that's the last thing you want. You want your neighbor that you're helping, and that you appreciate in life to be your neighbor that you still adore, when the time marches on. But I was just curious about that because we're at the very beginning of what's going to be a very long relationship together. And so far, so good. But I was just curious about what your thoughts were on cohabitating with others.
Hope is not a strategy. So
Yeah,
absolutely have a plan. Planning is a strategy. Agreement is a strategy. Hope is a lovely word, and I enjoy the word, but it doesn't work for situations where we have very different habits. That's what it is. I mean, somebody takes a 27-minute shower and you take a 3-minute shower, and you're just like, what in the world is going on? But if you have that conversation, you agree to 15 minutes, then you don't have any right to be upset until minute 16. And then you want to give a little grace.
Mm-hmm.
But minute 17, you're okay knocking on the door.
I like that. Very, very interesting. Any other takeaways as we move forward? Because again, I want to just reiterate, the news that you watch goes in cycles, and what happened to us is part of a cycle, but it's going to come and it's going to go. And come Thanksgiving or Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever holidays are being celebrated together as families, it's going to look very different for a very long time. Construction, as we all know, does not happen overnight. So what about advice for the long haul?
So for the long haul, start thinking about not what it used to be, because those are your memories, and memories are wonderful. Start thinking about moving forward. What do you want it to be? And the minute you start saying, yeah, but the place we used to go isn't there, stop yourself and say, who can we support now? Where can we go eat that will be enjoyable? And turn the language truly to now forward versus what you had in the past. Because the most common loss that people experience is of a loved one. And so we all know and have experienced it, that if you keep saying, but if so-and-so were here, we'd be doing this, it takes you down a negative place. So if you do the same with the holidays, that, well, we can't have it at Gail's house because her neighbor's there, so now we have to go to this restaurant, then say we get to go to the restaurant, we get to include our neighbor, and really change your mindset. Mindset translates to energy, energy translates to words, words translate to action. So if we take the mindset into the way we convey it, you'll act accordingly and you'll enjoy your holidays. The other thing for both of you, Brody and Gail, is to think, if somebody says, yeah, but, turn it to yes, and. Let's say, yeah, but we used to do that. Yes, and what are you going to get to do this year?
Right.
So you really don't let that pull you down. It's great to have memories. It's not great to live in the memories with an expectation of the future.
Agreed. One last question before we wrap up. What about the people that are like, they're going through it? I mean, maybe like my neighbor that's living with me, her situation isn't as dire as yours. I mean, she's going to be out of her house. She's away from her kids because everybody had to kind of scramble to different houses. So what do you say to the person that's like, I'm not going to complain, or I'm not going to this, because they have it so much worse? It's okay to acknowledge your own personal loss. You don't have to wallow in it. But you can give yourself some grace to realize that things are different and they're not the same. And
absolutely. It's okay to say, I'm sad today, or I don't feel as good today, and then turn it into something else. The unfortunate part about this, when people say other people have it worse, because I said that too. We have some things other people don't, but you want to have it as a perspective, not a comparison. So the comparison aspect is, there's no winner in this type of situation. So if you lost your shed, but it had your things from your father who's no longer here, your grandfather, that loss to you is just as real as someone else's loss. So I think the comparison part is what we don't want. And if somebody says to you, yeah, but they didn't lose as much, say, let's not talk about them. Let's talk about you if you want to. And a really good thing to say is, if and when you're ready, I'm here to talk about what you're missing to assist you moving forward. Not, a lot of people, if you want to vent, if you want to do this, it's not great, because we can start to pile on.
yes.
And we don't even realize it. Oh yeah, this happened to me. This happened to me. So for the long term, think the future focus and gratitude. For the comparison, think more perspective than verbalizing a comparison. And allow yourself to say how you feel, even if you're moving in a really positive direction. Let it be where it is, and then let it be where you make it the next time.
Love it. Debbie, I want to thank you for sharing your personal story and for sharing your wisdom, the wisdom that, again, you share with people day in and day out to move them forward in life is the very same advice that is going to help so many who are feeling a lot of pain and a lot of loss. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Till next time, everybody.